for joining us. My name is Karen Atkinson, and I'm the program manager for the Pennsylvania LTAP program. Today, we have three panelists with us: Rick Stone from Maxwell Products, Sam Gregory from Pennsylvania LTAP, and Steve Kozer from PennDOT. So this is a very informal session. Please put comments in the chat. We've got a few polls also to get a little bit of information, but this is your session. Thank you. I'm going to let you take over, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Karen. As Karen and Matthew noted, this session is on hot pour mastics. Another tool for your toolbox for preventive maintenance to your pavements. It gives you another operation, another material for providing a more permanent repair to the problem areas. Next.
Oh, why am I not going? Hang on a second. Oop.
Are you to the next slide? Technical difficulties, obviously.
Sam, can you see the presentation?
No, I cannot. Just on my screen. I'm on slide 2 right at the moment. If somebody else wants to take over,
I can assist. This is Rick Stone. The question is, what are hot pour mastics? I've been involved with mastics for more than 20 years. This is a material. This is a technology that is really not new. It may be new to you, mostly because the development of these products occurred mostly west of the Mississippi, where they have been used for the last 15 years very successfully. And this is why we're now seeing it. We're just kind of late to the dance. But hot pour mastics were developed in response to a lack of performance, basically on wide cracks and hot pour crack sealants. We found that sealants could not be manufactured or engineered to perform not only give us an occlusive seal, but provide structural strength to wide, deep cracks. We needed something to pick up that void. So over the years, we have developed binders similar to crack sealant materials in that they have flexibility, they have tremendous bonding capabilities. When combined with proper engineered specific kind of aggregates, now give us a product that not only gives us a waterproof, occlusive seal, but also structural strength, and we return integrity back into the pavement. And that's what hot pour mastics are, if that makes sense.
Okay. With that, Rick, let's go to our first two polls and see what kind of response we get from the audience.
Polls open. Everyone should see that on their screen. It is, how many have heard it? 6. And I'll leave it open for another few seconds here. Okay, we got about 70% people reporting. I'm going to show the results on the screen. So it splits 30-30-30.
Okay, very interesting results on that. Similar to what we found in other presentations. Let's roll up the second poll.
Okay, so you can, if that's still on your screen, you should see that now. How many of you used hot pour mastics? Okay. A few more seconds here. And then, okay, I think that gives us a good feeling. So I'm going to throw up there. So 15,976, as far as majority of people have not used it. And then do you want me to go to the third poll or?
Let's wait on the third poll if we can, Matthew. Those are very interesting results. Like Rick said, most of the use has been in the western part of the state. So it is, like I said earlier, another tool for the toolbox. So if we could go to the next slide.
Okay.
Rick, you want to take it? I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. What I'm seeing here is the slide of some mastic being applied out the back of a melter. And as I had stated earlier, we are taking binders which are modified with polymers to give us tremendous elasticity, elongation, resilience, and a real bonding capability. When this stuff goes in, it sticks. It's called tensile adhesion. And that is one of the things that is really positive about this, because unlike other repair materials, this is really the only waterproof repair. So the performance level on this tends to be very long. And when I say very long, there are manufacturers that are engineering these products for a 1 to 3 year longevity, and then there are some who are going 8 to 10. So we can do a lot of things with this because, number one, it is waterproof. Number two, the aggregates in there are giving us structural strength back into the pavement. We're filling that void with a load-bearing material. We apply these materials with a melter, a hot pour melter, because these materials go down anywhere from 350 to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. They are blended, mixed, and formed, and then applied out of the back end of a mastic melter. And you can see one of the slides to the right doing that.
Rick, similar to crack sealing, one of the problems we had with crack sealing in the past was that if it was over applied, it would create a slippery condition in wet weather. Obviously, with the addition of the aggregate does add a little bit of skid resistance to it. I'm going to start with one of the questions I have. What is the preparation for placing this material?
What is the what?
The preparation. Do we have to keep the
preparation
clean, dry, etc.?
Because we're using a polymer modified asphalt, the same preparation that you would use for your hot pour crack sealing is appropriate here, meaning that we want the area clean of all loose dust and debris, because the binder is going to do what it's engineered to do. It's going to stick to the first thing that it comes in contact with. If that happens to be dirt, it's going to be dirt, and you're not going to get a good bond. It also needs to be dry because these are asphalt-based materials. We do have some products that are not in the mastic realm. They are resin-based, but it remains the same. You must have clean and dry. Once you do that, you get a surface that will be receptive to the product going in. Some manufacturers in this industry will recommend also that you use a primer to make sure that if you didn't get it really clean, if it wasn't really dry, the primer will assist in that. And the data would suggest from some of the manufacturers that a primer will extend the life of that pavement by as much as 2 years. So you want to talk to your manufacturer on that and be prepared that some of them may recommend a primer as well.
Rick, I notice we talk about the mastic kettle. With a crack sealing kettle, obviously you're going to pump the material out. This, with the addition of the aggregate, obviously has to be gravity flowed onto your spreader.
Yeah, the aggregates will not allow us to put it through a pump. Not a big deal, because these machines, there are about now 4 manufacturers of these type of melters. You can apply them, or they come out of the back of the machine, the rear of the machine, in several ways. Number one, there's generally a guillotine type valve. Basically, it's just a slice that opens and closes. And the material comes out the back. You can either drop it right out of the back, you can drop it into a chute, which allows you to pivot left and right to help direct the material. You can put it directly into a small shuttle buggy to move it over to the repair area. Some people are using it directly into metal pails, buckets. But the one constant in all of this is that it does come out of the rear. It is a rather heavy, thick type material because of the aggregates in there. But once you get used to it, it is distributed and applied fairly quickly I can teach somebody to do it in 45 minutes, I think.
Okay, the next slide that I'm seeing is the binder and aggregate, how it's packaged, and also the mastic melter has to be equipped with a horizontal agitator. You want to talk about that, Rick, and how it keeps it in suspension?
Yeah, because the aggregates themselves, the stone wants to fall to the bottom, it wants to sink to the bottom of the melter. We need a way of keeping that suspended. And so if we use a horizontal agitator with a paddle sweep that pulls the material up, we know that we can keep those materials in a homogeneous blend between binder and aggregate. And so the easiest way to do that, obviously, is a horizontal agitator. Again, there are 2 more manufacturers that have just entered the marketplace. I haven't seen their units, but I'm assuming they're horizontal agitators. I don't know that for sure. The materials themselves are packaged and pre-formed as to their formulations with the proper portions of binder and aggregate, depending on the kind of product, the kind of mastic it is, and the formula that that particular manufacturer has. Some of them you can just drop the whole box in because the container itself is designed to melt as part of the mix. Some manufacturers are placing their product in a liner or a cardboard box that has a liner in it, and you just rip the cardboard off, and then you put the whole lined cube into the melter. That's basically the way it's being packaged right now.
Rick, do you want to mention why we emphasize, or you have highlighted, that horizontal agitation for this material is different than for crack sealing material? What kind of agitation is used for that?
Yeah, the difference between crack sealant and mastics is the binders are different for crack sealant. The polymers may be a little bit different. They are similar to mastics, but please keep in mind, when we're talking about mastics, the one thing I don't want the public to perceive this as is nothing more than crack sealant with stones in it. It is not that at all. They are totally different materials, but they come from the same engineered background in terms of their asphalt applications and how they are formulated by manufacturers. So we can have a melter with a vertical agitator to melt traditional hot pour crack sealant materials. But on the mastic side, it's really very important that we keep that heavier aggregate in suspension in the binder. And so we need to keep lifting that up and blending it to keep it in suspension.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Good point, Rick. The next slide is showing a couple different applicators placing the material. It looks like into some transverse cracking. Obviously, there are different means of doing that, like you spoke.
Yeah, this is one of those, there's no individual one way to do this. And I find that letting the general public find ways that works for them is actually better for everybody, because we learn how to do things sometimes in a more efficient manner. As I say, most of the manufacturers give you the option of taking it right out the back without a chute and just dropping it into the hole or the repair area. Or they will provide a chute which helps you direct it towards, in this case on the picture on the left, a screed box that is just attached to the back end of the chute. Or it can go directly into a separate unit that you see on the right, was more of a shuttle buggy that takes it over to an area that is probably several yards from the melter anyway. It gives you flexibility to not be tied to exactly where the melter is at the repair area. You can also just drop it into a handheld box screed, because most of these applications are box screed or screed applications where we take it and we fill from the bottom up and you strike it off at the surface. And that's when you see the graininess and the texture of the aggregates at the surface, and hopefully not a smooth, shiny surface. If at the end of an application you see that the surface is smooth and shiny, It means that we've had segregation, or that the aggregates, the stones, have settled more towards the bottom and the binder is floated to the top. Segregation is a big issue in this application, and there are ways to deal with that, but I want you to be aware of it as we're talking about it here today.
Good point, Rick. The next few slides are going to show some areas where this material has been successfully used. I know in the past with crack sealing, sometimes people were trying to apply it to areas that didn't lend itself to it, cracks an inch or greater. These slides, there's three different photographs, excuse me, showing how it works in a transverse crack.
Yeah, this was interesting because this was done in Northern Virginia at a rather affluent suburban neighborhood where the pavement had cracks that were 1.5 inches to 2 inches wide and as deep as 9 inches. Something I hadn't seen ever anywhere. Mastics was a perfect application because we now return structural strength back into the pavement by filling those wide cracks, which is exactly what this material was designed to do initially. And we can strike it off on the surface, and we can leave an occlusive seal, meaning no water is going to get in there. The resilience or the flexibility of the binder itself will allow it to flex and bend and move with the expansion and contraction of the pavement. So this is going to be a repair we expect to last somewhere in the probably 6 to 8 year range.
What about cure time on that, Rick? I know with crack sealing, sometimes traffic wanted to get on it before it was totally set up. Is that similar with this material?
In the same manner that these products are heated, we also have to allow them to cool. There is no curing, there is just cooling on this. So once the product sets from we have it set somewhere from 125 degrees or cooler. This product is permanent. That's the way it's going to be. So depending on your weather conditions, the temperature, outside temperature, the pavement temperature, it could take anywhere from 15 minutes if we're doing this in really cold temperatures to a couple of hours to cool. I've been out on a job site when we did this at 95 degrees, and the temperature of the mastic itself just took that long to cool down in the hot weather. We can accelerate that cooling by just putting water on it. That will do that really quickly. And in an extreme case where we had to get a bridge deck open early, we went out and bought bags of ice and put it on the repair areas, and that worked great.
It's something to consider from an operational standpoint. Again, the next slide is a meandering crack greater than 1 inch going across the pavement area. Very similar application.
Yeah, this was a good example of the before and after. You can see the crack on the left. This, I believe, is in a parking lot situation, and then how it's repaired on the right. It is in it's in a form which we call an overband, because we want that material to make sure that water cannot penetrate from either side of the crack, and this will assure that. We keep the area on in excess of the crack wide for that reason, but we can also smooth that out and minimize any kind of bumping that comes with that just by taking a hot plate, steel hot plate, and putting it over and rounding and rolling over the edges. And that's what we do in most of these mastic applications, so we don't get big bumps.
That's a very good point. Someone mentioned yesterday when I was talking about seal coat, snowplows taking it off, and I would assume you want it as thin as possible to the pavement so the snowplows don't do damage to it.
Rick,
Yeah.
on that same note, what is the consistency of the hot material?
That will depend on the manufacturer's product. There are half a dozen manufacturers in North America making all different kinds of mastics. They all fall into the category of mastics because it's a modified binder with aggregates, but they're all different. And when I say that, believe me, each manufacturer has a product that they are putting out into the marketplace to serve their customer base. And that could be different from region to region, state to state, sometimes even county to county. So it's not all consistent, but I would say that for the most part, you should be looking at something that is a thick oatmeal type of a flow. There are those that are actually more dense, and then there are some that flow even more, depending on what manufacturer and what product within that manufacturer's variety you are using. Does that make sense? Yeah. I want to address the plow issue as well too. There are products, there are mastics that are designed to be flexible in cold temperatures, and there are those that are designed to be flexible at moderate or warmer temperatures. And depending on what manufacturer, again, you're using and the product you're using, plow damage can occur at 32 degrees if the product is designed to be stiffer and it would chip. And then there are products that will stay flexible to minus 15 degrees, where if a plow hits it, it will just shear off and make it smooth. So you want to ask your representative who is supplying the product what their parameters are and what's best for your situation.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Rick. And I talk about that. No matter what type of operation or material you're using, your manufacturers are the experts in it, and make sure it is the right treatment for what you're trying to correct out there. The next slide shows some shoulder joints on Interstate 70, a problem area all over the country, as far as I know. You want to speak on this, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, I could make a living just going across the country, just doing shoulder joints and paving seam failures. This was done outside of Frederick on I-70 several years ago. You can see the shoulder joint failure. This was very typical of what we were experiencing. It was extended, this went on for miles. Sometimes it was 4 or 5 inches deep, 6 inches wide. Just a single pass with the mastic, filled it, struck it off, problem solved. And that's what I like about mastics. It's a quick repair. It's a permanent repair. We say permanent because it's going to outlast the pavement that we put it in. And there's no other products, there's no other systems that will do that currently in the marketplace. And the variability and the variety of how we can use this makes it one of those very desirable type processes that we see more and more people getting into.
The next slide is showing some pictures, and what I like about this, over the years, as Rick's well aware of, I've done a lot of research and a lot of operational crack sealing, and one of the things that causes problems with crack sealing was the crews would think they had to seal the entire area, and the pictures you're seeing here show some fatigue cracking, and if you used a plain crack sealing material, obviously that would cause a skid problem and really not repair what you were trying to fix. So this is a wider repair to that area, and it looks like it's going to be successful.
Yeah, one of the things I want to comment on is that mastics are very good in situations where your hydraulics or your flow of water needs to be addressed. And because it's a waterproof product and we can spread this thing thin and create a structural wide patch that is waterproof around any type of water flow, it's a great product to use.
Can I just interject here for a second? We've got a question. Can you paint or place thermoplastic over top the finished surface?
Okay, the answer to that is yes. Keeping in mind that this product is going to flex and move and bend. That's what it's engineered to do. Different manufacturers' product will last a little bit longer or shorter than others, but in general, the answer is yes. But it is not, your paint over this product will not last as long as it would if it were just over plain asphalt, your asphalt pavement, hot mix.
Excellent question, something I hadn't thought of before.
We also have another question of what is the size of the aggregate used?
Again, each manufacturer is developing products and formulations of aggregates depending on the kind of use. There are generalist materials that are manufactured that are using anything from an eighth to or smaller aggregate. There's one manufacturer that creates a product almost looks like a sand mix. It's that small. There are also mastics out there that have larger aggregates in them for wider, deeper, more aggressive repairs. I advocate the use of those type in a lot of situations where we're trying to deal with a lot of load over an extended area. So large aggregates are out there. Again, talk to your manufacturer and see if they provide that. If they don't, maybe they could recommend a manufacturer that does specialize in having larger aggregates.
Another very good question. The next slide is showing an area where, similar to what you just spoke about, Rick, it looks like the filling of somewhat of a pothole or a delaminated area on the left, the photograph on the left, and you can see the finished repair on the right, kind of the squared off area.
Yeah, I like this slide a lot because there's a lot going on here to the naked eye. We've got, first off, a concrete curb situation that butts up against asphalt. So we've got that joint, which is always going to start to fail. You can see that they tried to crack seal, but it's kind of gotten out of hand as the pavement has further deteriorated. We've got some raveling, some potholing going on. So we've taken and made a skin patch over that area. We used a topping stone on top of that for aesthetics, but we're also finding in the industry, the topping stone acts as a UV ray shield and helps prevent aggressive degradation of asphalt, so it lasts a little bit longer. And as a follow-up to this, I happen to know that 4 years after that repair was made, the town came back and then put a microsurface over the top of that. And this is the important thing to understand right now as well, is that any surface treatment that you're currently using is compatible with mastics. So go ahead and mastic your brains out, because we can put anything over the top of it and it'll actually enhance whatever surface treatment that you put on top of it.
Good point. Rick, one question on the topping that we're seeing in the photograph to the right. Because of the way the binder is manufactured, the topping adheres to it. It doesn't try to repel away from it like some other similar material.
Unlike a crack sealant material that's designed, that has resilience or pushback onto that, there is less of that in a mastic mix. And so we find that you can embed a aggregate on top of it. The truth is, however, traffic's going to need that in probably within the first 30 days, and that'll all turn black again anyway. But for some manufacturers that may have a segregation problem, a topping stone will assure that you have a nice friction course on top as well. But I like to think of it more as a protective coat, or just putting the top on that so that it will last longer. Do you have to do that? No, but there are manufacturers that would recommend it.
Okay, very good. On the next slide, on the raised manholes, that's something that I encounter a lot when I'm dealing with winter maintenance operations. A lot of the pavement around the manholes settles a little bit, and if you've ever plowed snow, you don't want to hit that manhole with your plow, or you're going to get intimate with the steering wheel very quickly. So obviously this is another use for it.
Yeah, this is one of the things that it's probably used more than you would think in two ways. A raised manhole, we can fix that in less than 5 minutes by just simply putting a ramp around it. Just drag your box screed tool around it, and you've now created a ramp so the plows go up and over. The photos that you're seeing here are the other way, where the concrete around these manholes, this is in Norfolk, Virginia, had all spalled out. That is old concrete. They didn't know what to do with it. And the picture on the right may look a little sloppy, but I'll tell you right now, that went in there, fixed that problem, and everybody was very happy because they had no way of maintaining or returning a good driving surface to that manhole. And that was very deep. That was, the spalling on that was like a foot at its width and as much as 6 inches deep. And they were very grateful and saw the advantages to using Mastics in these kind of applications.
Rick, I have a question. I'm pretty sure it was on the last one. Was the patch applied with just a box tool?
The answer to that is yes. We can take the box tool, which are, you can have any width that you really want. Typically, they're 12 to 18 inches wide. That is used generally speaking. And we can drag a section side by side and blend them all together. It's rather easy. But one of the things that we are developing at the company I work for right now is we have been utilizing a box screed that's 4 feet wide and literally attaches to the back of the melter. And similar to a paving operation, we are able to create long runs at a width that is bigger than most. It will be my guess before the end of the decade that we will be able to have the equipment to create a 12-foot wide box so that we could drag probably, let's say 100 to 200 feet at a time with material. When that happens, you're going to see this type of material used a lot on bridge decks, on very bad pavements, because it's a single pass waterproof repair. That's the cool part about this material.
Rick, on that same note with the single pass question, do you have any settlement as the void area as the material cools? And can you reapply to level things flush with the adjacent surface?
If you do have situations where the product does settle out, the answer to your question simply is yes, you can come back and apply more to that. And you can do that even as late as a day or a week later or a year later. Mastics are very receptive to additional fixes, let's put it that way.
Well, in following up with that question, Rick, and I'm not sure where the question was going, but if I'm assuming if it was very deep, that would lend itself to the larger aggregate. But if you were out there and it did happen to settle, could you level it off on the same day after it cooled off?
Yes, you can. One of the things that I advocate and that I have seen used very successfully is actually an over application of these Mastics in regions where they do snow plowing. And I'll tell you why. Because the first time the plow comes through, boom, shaves it off smooth. It's really kind of cool. Watch it, and it won't ever pull out. So that's a good way to get it really level.
Rick, I have one more here. Is it a good solution for concrete maintenance, like in the case in this photo?
Absolutely. One of the things that I do advocate is the use of hot pour Mastics in concrete with a primer. My experience has been the primer will help the bonding and the tensile adhesion of that. If you can take and appreciate the cosmetics difference, if cosmetics is important, we do have resin-based gray Mastics, but if you can handle or live with the difference in color between the black and the white, and some people will put a white topping stone on it to help mitigate that. I absolutely advocate the use of asphalt-based Mastics in concrete. We use it on bridge decks a lot and bridge approaches as well.
I hope I'm saying this one right, but Structurally, does it have the compassive strength for dynamic loads? Compressive strength for dynamic loads.
If the product remains homogeneous when it comes out of the melter and is applied so that there is a good distribution of binder to the aggregates, the answer is yes. This is one of the coolest things about this materials. We can take those loads.
Okay, one more. Is the material used in the winter? If the material is used in the winter months, as long as the surface is dry?
Depending on the manufacturer's product, there are some mastics out there that are only flexible, only good to about 32 degrees, and they may go down to 0 degrees. I don't know. There are some manufacturers that go down to minus 15 degrees. The company that I represent has products that routinely can be placed at 0 degrees and are flexible and work to minus 15 degrees. The problem is getting somebody on your crew to go out there in 0 degrees to do it. I'll be honest with you, that's the hard part.
Yeah, the last couple of questions go back to what we've been talking about. You need to discuss with the manufacturer what you're trying to solve out there, and will it work in the conditions you're dealing with, I think is a good answer to that.
Yeah,
absolutely. The next slide is another area going into a drainage facility. We've talked a lot. Steve, can you give us a little insight onto your experience when you did the research in Pennsylvania?
From what perspective, Sam, are you asking?
What different uses you used it for when you did the research, and how did the crews like the use of it?
Well, our actual experience at PennDOT has been mostly for longitudinal joints or transverse cracks. We have done some at bridge approaches, but we did find out from the research that we did with talking with up to 30 other states or state DOTs that everything that's being covered so far about drainage facilities, repair areas for potholes, et cetera, they all were in the results that we obtained from the others, talking to the other states. So nothing that Rick and Sam have covered so far was not in our research. But like I said, our majority of our use has been for where we have a pavement that's still pretty good shape, but you might have a shoulder crack longitudinally or a paving seam or centerline joint seam. That's where the cracking has been that we've been addressing primarily. Although we did use some, like I said, on a bridge approach. We also had a contractor use it to hold together a pavement through the winter that we were concerned about on an interstate, not making it through the winter because there was a pavement project that was going to be a multi-year project. So they used it 2 different times during that construction project, once before winter and then once coming out of winter in the springtime, which was just this year. So we've been successfully, I mean, what we've seen so far has been successful. And so I guess that's kind of what you're after, Sam, right?
Yeah, I just wanted some other perspective on it.
Steve, I actually have a couple questions for you. Is this product PennDOT approved?
Yes, there's at least 4. There might be a 5th product that's been approved conditionally. So that means that we're still monitoring it for the next 2 years just to see what the performance has been and see if there's any difference between different manufacturers' products. But yes, our municipal liquid fuels funds can be used for this material. It can be purchased off state contract. Not only the material, but we also have equipment that we do not own because it is a kind of a specialized piece of equipment, but we rent it from different manufacturers. And I believe it was one manufacturer's equipment with another manufacturer's product that we've used in the past too. So they seem to be somewhat compatible with each other. Rick, do you want to comment on the equipment issue?
Yep. Up until recently, there have been basically two players in the equipment side of the mastic industry. Again, we're getting another two here in the next several months. All of the products, or most of the products that are manufactured, are compatible in both those manufacturers. If they don't have one that is, they'll have another one that is. And I say that because sometimes the density of the aggregate will prevent it from being used in one of the others. But the generalist, the products that have been approved by PennDOT and some other states do work in all of the mastic melters. It's in the interest of the manufacturers of those melters to have a piece of equipment that is compatible with everything that's made out there, that's made and manufactured. So they all want it to work, definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize one more thing that was brought up earlier about a question, can it be used, this material be used in a winter application if it's dry? You got to keep what Rick had talked about earlier. It's got to be clean and dry. You have to have those two conditions.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, if my clock is correct, you have another question, Karen?
I do.
Go ahead.
So this person uses rubberized sealants in many specs. Some are designed for vehicles versus pedestrian traffic. Is the mastic designed in a similar way? Would there be a different spec for ped traffic versus a parking lot or versus a road?
The general answer to that is no. However, I will say that there are mastics that are designed for cold weather, for hot weather, and then for a medium temperature weather. So there is a difference, but not for general traffic conditions, except width and depth of repairs.
Are
They're
there
not all the
limits?
same. They're different, but talk to your manufacturer about what you want to do with it. And I know that we have a product for you.
Are there limits to the size and the depth of when you can apply the mastic products?
In a general answer, no, there are no limits, but there are certain steps that you must have to deal with something deeper as opposed to something that's not as deep. We may have to put in additional aggregate, what's called bulking stone, if it's a small aggregate and we need to get a little bit more structural strength in there. But in general, the answer is no. We can handle most of everything that's out there as long as you talk to your manufacturer and let them know what you would like to do with it.
Well, Rick, wouldn't it really need to be about an inch wide though, approximately, so that the aggregate actually has a chance to get into the void?
Yeah, in terms of limits in that regard, yes, there is a minimum width. We need about an inch or a little bit wider than width so we can get the material inside that crack. But in terms of a lateral or a longitudinal application, we're very open.
Steve, maybe this was one for you. Does the product mill well off the surface, or does it pull out? Is there required patching before an overlay?
Well, from our research, and you don't like to bring up negative things, but this might be the only thing that kind of is a positive and a negative. The positive that we've heard is that the material stays flexible, as Rick was saying, for years. And when they do milling, we've heard from other states that have had to go back and do projects where they were using wrap material, and they basically said it gets and stays so flexible that it gums up the equipment. So they were recommending if you use hot pour mastics, say in a longitudinal crack installation, you should mill that section out and waste that wrap material. But the other pavement that did not have the hot pour mastic used can be used as a wrap material. So they were recommending that you segregate it out. But you know, that's kind of a positive that it stays flexible. But then the negative is it kind of gums up the equipment when you're trying to remove it as a wrap material, and it might have effects on the asphalt binder if you would use that too, even if you could mill it up. So I don't know, Rick, do you have any other experience? Because we don't have a personal experience with it because we have been so new to the application of this material.
Yeah, excuse me, Steve, I'm going to have to apologize to sort of end here because we have gone over our time and we do have another session coming up. So I know we've had a lot of good questions in the chat box. Karen, did you have?
I just wanted to say Rick Stone and Sam Gregory's information is on the screen. If you guys have further questions or would like some more information, feel free to reach out to them. Or you can also reach
Absolutely.
out to the Pennsylvania LTAP.
All right. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you for joining us.